fellow pen lovers and stationery enthusiasts, it's Christy here, Snarky Wordsworth over on Instagram and Reddit, and today I'm going to be doing my currently inked for September list for everybody out there. So I had such a hard time coming up with these 8 colors, primarily because I love all autumn colors. They are so my jam. I love all the browns, give me all the olives, the golds, the oranges. That's just where my heart lies. So I'm very excited to share this list with you. Let me also say that the lighting might get kind of wonky. I am starting this much later than I intended to, but life happens, you know how it goes. So hopefully the light won't get too crazy, but if it does, apologies in advance. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started with the inks. Okay, we are actually going to get things started with a custom ink blend that I put together. This is called Majestic Lady Oyster. I combined a number of Ferris wheel press inks, and it actually goes with my absolutely beautiful Virgo from Zodiac Pen Company. This is one of my all-time favorite pens. I love the way it feels in the hand, and I didn't have an ink that I loved in it until I just blended this on my own. So here we go. Okay, so this was actually the first ink that I ever blended on my own, and I did it specifically so I could find an ink that would match these really beautiful sort of pinky beige, golden shimmery sections of this pen. It's a golden abalone blank, and I absolutely adore it, but I didn't have anything in my collection, so I worked on this and finally came up with a formula I really, really like. If you're curious about it and you like the color, I do have a video talking all about this and a couple of other variations that I did that you're more than welcome to play around with. Or if you just want to pop questions in the comments, that's totally fine too. But I took primarily Majestic Maple, which was a little too full of shimmer, and it was definitely not the right tone for me in this pen. And I blended a little bit of pink into it, a little bit of Lady Rose, a little bit of Spadina Pink, or Spadina Rose, and a couple other things, Oyster Hour, to sort of bring that beige back to the forefront, and came up with this. It works really, really well. No hard stops. This is a fine nib, and I still don't have issues with the amount of shimmer hitting the feed, which I have had when it's just Majestic Maple. I couldn't even get that thing to go through a TWSBI stub. So, you know, I played around enough with it to dilute, I guess, the shimmer, and I really, really like the way it looks with this. You get a lot of really great shimmer throughout text, but nothing that is overwhelming to either your eye or to your pen. So yeah, really, really like it. And again, if you have any questions, pop those in the comments. Okay, next up, I have a Robert Oster ink in Coffee Date, and I've got that inked up in my beloved Papa J Woodworks pen. This is the Aretha, and I think they're a great match. So let's go ahead and swatch this out. So look at the match between Robert Oster's Coffee Date and this pen. Is it not just total perfection? I am so pleased. If you've listened to this channel before, you may have heard me talk about Robert Oster inks before. I definitely have a bit of a love-hate relationship with him. I find a lot of his inks quite dry, but for whatever reason, this one has a fantastic formula. So far, I've had no real trouble, and it's been a couple of days. I will say that all of Papa J Woodworks pens do leave his studio with a Kirkspear tuned nib, so that might have something to do with it. I'm not sure. But in this instance, this ink does not feel dry. It has a very average flow. You've got some really beautiful shading. Like there's some really, really lovely shading going on where you get like the super warm, deeper browns, but then you also get some of the slightly lighter yellows. I love that. Gold inks, again, definitely are my jam. And it really does seem to fit like the whole concept of Coffee Date. It's very warm. It's very friendly, user-friendly. I like it. I like it a lot. And looking forward to seeing how it does in this pen over the course of this month. Okay, next up I have Lit d'été from Herbin, and I have that inked up in my favorite Sailor Pro Gear. This is a beautiful, beautiful colorway. It's from the old cocktail series from like 2014 or 15, and this is called Black Velvet. Apparently a black velvet drink is stout in champagne, which sounds absolutely vile to me, but makes for a really pretty pen. So let's go ahead and get this all swatched out. Okay, so I really enjoy Lit d'été. I do think it is a lovely, really complex kind of brown. You've got loads of shading that comes through, even in what I think of as quite a fine nib. I know it's a medium fine technically, but we all know how sailors are. I really, really think it's lovely. Definitely leans yellow as far as browns go, but you've got that warmth and you can see it all throughout the entire stretch of text. Even in this medium fine sailor, you get to see a lot of the complexity that you wouldn't necessarily expect to see in a finer nib like this. So definitely really excited to be able to show that off throughout the course of the month. It also reminds me that some of these inks I really need to use more often. And while I try and use summery colors in the summer and spring colors in the spring, I just love autumn shades so much. I feel like I should have autumn in like May or April or something, just so that I can get a chance to use more of my really beautiful browns. But yes, I think Herbin is a wonderful color for this time of year, or any time of year really, and highly, highly recommend you give it a try. All right, next up, I have Monteverde's Moonstone in my brand new needlepoint from Esterbrook. I actually had this ground down from an extra fine to a Kirkspear needlepoint. I am loving this thing so much. It is so crisp, so clean. I just am very excited, but I knew I was going to need a really well lubricated ink to write comfortably in, and Monteverde's Moonstone is wonderful. It's kind of a cooler toned brown, but it's super duper wet. It is great in these ridiculously fine nibs, and it's just a really, really nice color. It is also an insanely affordable ink company. I think I got this 90 milliliter bottle for like $15 or something crazy. And I don't know too many other companies that are going to give you that huge of an amount of ink. Moonstone has also been one of my go-to inks for a very long time. I do really like how it's super consistent and it writes so dark that it almost comes across as a bit of a black shade in one of these like crazy fine nibs. So you can get away from it in a workplace environment or just for fun, whatever. But yeah, I really, really do like this ink and I'm excited to go ahead and get to swatch it for you. It's been a while since I used it because again, I just don't get to use all of my fall tones as much as I'd like to. Okay, so there you have Monteverde's Moonstone in my Needlepoint Esterbrook Estie. I, again, just really enjoy this sort of slightly cooler brown. It is very calming to write with if you like to sort of set a mood when you're journaling or what have you. There's not a ton of shading, so if you are a hardcore shading fan, this is probably not going to give you what you're looking for, but it is very, very consistent, quite a wet writing ink. So this is this is a true needlepoint, and even though it is a true needlepoint, you get like a reasonable line. This is a little bit thicker than say an average flowing ink would be for me, at least in the couple of weeks that I've had this. I really, really like the way that the ink reacts to this nib. I think that it's very, very comfortable to write with and would definitely recommend it to anyone who is looking for something that is wet writing and will work in a finer nib. Okay, so next up is one of my absolute favorite inks. This is Vinta's Burnt Sugar, which is also Anibal. It is a warm brown with gold shimmer in it, and I absolutely love writing with it. It is so much fun to see on your page. It's just a really, really great formulated ink, for me anyway. And I have this in my Walltown Pens Onslow in the Powa Abalone with a satin finish. I adore this pen. Look at this. This is just crazy. Like, seriously, how beautiful is this pen? Anyway, I just recently had this ground to a cursive smooth italic in fine, and it writes like a dream, and it has been doing very well with this ink. So let's go ahead and get to the swatch. Okay, so it is still wet, so you can't quite get the full vibe for how much shimmer is in this ink formula, but it is glorious. And it's glorious in a way that is totally usable. I've used this particular ink in multiple nibs from standard fines all the way up to stubs, and I have not had a problem. Again, person to person, usage is definitely just going to be one of those things that you kind of have to test out yourself. But for me, I really, really like this particular ink, and it has not had any trouble for me as far as feed clogging or anything like that. It is a lovely warm brown to begin with, but then you get even more warmth from that gold shimmer. I really, really do enjoy this particular color in this pen, namely because I do think that Cursive Smooth Italic shows off a lot of the character of the ink. There's not a huge amount of shading with this one. There's a little bit, but you mainly get a lot of, pop from that shimmer in it. So again, if you are a fan of heavily shading inks, this one might not be for you, but if you do like shimmers that you can use in a lot of different nibs, this one is definitely a go-to for me. Okay, next up is one of the inks that I picked up at the San Francisco Pen Show. I absolutely adored this color from the first time I swatched it. This is the Autumn Night After 1,000 Years. It is a beautiful, beautiful olive tone with gold shimmer in it. There's just something so warm, earthy, and that just screams fall about this one. I mean, it's got autumn right in the name, so that fits. Anyway, I think it looks especially lovely in my Pelikan M400 in the white tortoise. I adore this pen. It is quite a small pen, so if you like larger pens, this guy is definitely not for you, but because I like smaller pens and I have slightly smaller hands, it's great for me. I also just recently had this ground into a journaler nib by Gina Salarino. It is fantastic. I absolutely adore this nib. I adore the journaler grind in general, and it really shows off this ink. All right, so the shimmer in Wearingeul Autumn Night After 1,000 Years is very much the opposite of Anibal. Super duper subdued. You don't immediately even notice it in the text until you sort of tilt the page one way or the other, and then you see it just sort of lightly scattered throughout the text. Not a feed clogger at all, at least not so far in my experience, just a really, really solid deep sort of dusky olive. I love this color. It's definitely one of my favorites that I picked up while I was in San Francisco. I just think it is stunning. You've got a boatload of shading going on throughout, and yes, it is absolutely aided by a really good nib, but I just love all of the different highs and lows from this olive color that come across, and it's just my favorite kind of olive. And then you have those little tiny specks of gold shimmer throughout, and it just makes it a really, really fun writing experience. Okay, next up is an olive from the Encre Classique line of L'Artisan Pastellier. This is just one of my go-to olive-colored inks. It's beautiful. It's got that green-gray, slightly brownish tone to it. Just a really, really lovely, consistent color. And I've got that inked up in my brand new vintage Sheaffer Balance. This one has been so much fun to write with. I am so glad that Egg Bunny just convinced me to pick this up because it has just been delightful. I love the celluloid in this thing. It's just so flippin' pretty, like crazy pretty. And it's just a really, really interesting pen. I do love vintage, even though I know absolutely nothing about it. I just know what I think is pretty, and I think this is really beautiful. Okay, yeah, the light is definitely affecting the color here a little bit more. It is a bit more dusky gray brown than is coming across on the screen, but it is a phenomenal, phenomenal color. The olive from the Encre Classique line is one of my favorite go-tos when it comes to this kind of shade. It is a beautiful wet writing ink for me. It does shade quite lovely, and it's one that I can put in a ton of different pens and never worry. It always feels like it matches a little because it's got that gray, that green, that brown all mixed together. But yeah, really, really like this ink, and I think it looks amazing in this particular nib. Okay, last but not least is my beautiful, beautiful Mystic Storm from Robert Oster. I got this in an ink swap with the lovely Jana Leon, and I have this color inked up in my Pilot Custom 742. This is an SU nib, and it just looks fantastic. All right, I think that this Robert Oster Mystic Storm is the perfect way to close things out. I did not expect to love this color as much as I do, but let me tell you, I will be ordering an entire bottle of this because it is a wonderful, wonderful ink. Yes, the shade is gorgeous. It sort of falls between a purple, a navy, a gray, and it's just, I'm all about it. But it's also a really well-behaved ink. I've talked about it before. I love this pen. I use it a lot. But the Satibu nib from Pilot is a little bit persnickety. It does feel a little scratchy with certain kinds of inks. Like an average flow or certainly a dry flowing ink will just be an epically unpleasant experience, at least for me. So I know that this Mystic Storm must be quite a wet ink to be as pleasant as it is in here. I really, really love it. This is one of those nibs that I usually have to go after like my wettest inks, like so the crazy wet ones from Iroshizuku, or like Diamine's Writer's Blood, which is like very, very wet as well, in order to really enjoy the writing experience. And man, do I like writing with this. I've written so many journal entries. I actually swapped this in when I was working on my ink swatches for Jana's collection, and I have not swapped it out since. I really, really like it a whole lot. And you know, that's one of those things. Just like I said, Robert Oster and I have not always had the best relationship, but man, I think we're coming to a reconciliation because these two, thumbs up, Robert Oster. I love these. So maybe I will start to re-explore his other colors and see what else I can enjoy. But yeah, Mystic Storm, definitely a winner. Wet writing ink, beautiful shading, like absolutely exquisite shading, and the whole like body of its color, those blends of purples and navies and grays. It's just, this ticks all the boxes, man. So yeah, definitely check out Mystic Storm. It is wonderful. All right, so I've given these inks a little bit of time to dry all the way down, and they are ready for their close-ups. That first one is my custom Ferris wheel press blend, Majestic Lady Oyster. And I really do like this sort of beigey, pinky shimmer color. It's just really, really great in golden abalone pens, and it's just really, really fun to write with in general. Right below that is Robert Oster's Coffee Date. This color is fabulous. Look at all that shading. In a fine nib, look at all that shading. I definitely will be using this a lot this fall, and I'm excited to play around with it this month. Right below that is Herbin's Lit one of those standby inks that I think a lot of people really love. You can see how nice this looks even in my Pro Beer Medium Fine. I really, really enjoy this color, and I just think it is a wonderful ink that you can use in pretty much any pen and nib. And right below there is my old standby Monteverde's Moonstone. This is one of those inks that will work in even the finest nibs. So like in this Needlepoint, which of course is by Matthew Chen. I'm so sorry, I misspoke earlier. This Needlepoint is a wonderful, wonderful nib, but definitely wants like one of those well-flowing inks, and Moonstone definitely checks that box. Up here, you've got Burnt Sugar from Vinta. Now, the shimmer isn't showing up super well on screen, but in real life, it is crazy throughout the text over here. And it does write really, really comfortably and easily for me. No feed clogging, and it looks great in a cursive smooth italic. I've used it again in fine nibs all the way up to stubs without any problems, and I just really enjoy the shade in general. You've got that warm brown with that lovely gold shimmer mixed in. So if that is your jam, Burnt Sugar is definitely worth a try. Right below that is the mother of subtle shimmer inks, Wearingeul's Autumn Night After 1,000 Years. I fell in love with this ink the second that I swatched it, and I remain enamored. Beautiful, beautiful color. I love this sort of very gray, green olive, and it just looks so good with those little pops of shimmer throughout. Super duper subtle though, so definitely again one of those inks that I wouldn't say is for shimmer crazed fans. Like, that's not what this is, but if you just like a hint of shimmer, this might be perfect for you. Right below there is L'Artisan Pastellier, the Encre Classique line in olive. I just really love this color. I love grays and greens and browns, and this is just a very consistent wet writer. It looks great in the Sheaffer balance, and it's one that I would recommend to really anyone who enjoys olive shades at all, or grays at that. And right below there is the surprise of one of my recent ink swaps. I love Robert Oster's Mystic Storm. Man, this thing is so pretty. Purple, lavender, navy, blue, gray. It's just all over the place with a ludicrous amount of shading. Look at that. Look, how beautiful is that? And it works really well even in my custom 742 with this taboo nib. I definitely think that speaks very highly of this formulation. I'm curious as to if it's too wet in a fine or an extra fine, but you never know. I might try that out just to see. But yeah, I love this color, and I think it works really well in this nib. All right, so these are my colors for September. I think this whole palette is fantastic. I am so happy. I'm legitimately smiling right now. You can't see, but I am. These colors just bounce so well off of one another. If you happen to have any questions about any of them, please pop those questions in the comments and I will answer as best I can. If you have any thoughts as to how any of these have worked for you in the past, if you thought they were particularly dry, particularly wet, if they work really well in a certain kind of nib, definitely make note of that in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. And just in general, if you feel like striking up a conversation, always feel free. I do love to talk about pens and inks, so never is a bad time. Alright, so if this video was in any way entertaining, interesting, useful, whatever, please do consider giving it a thumbs up or potentially even joining the channel. With that, thank you so much for joining me. If you have made it to the end of this video, you are everything that is awesome. Once again, thank you so much for joining me, and hopefully I will see you next time. Bye-bye!